Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Adam Christ, and I'm a licensed realtor with People's Company. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Clark Organics webinar. On the call with me today is going to be Steve Brewer, President of People's Company, Greg Jewell of Jewell and Associates, Jeff Kramer of Heartland Ecological Group. I'd like to tell everyone a little bit about People's Company before we get started on the main webinar. People's Company is licensed in 30 states to complete land transactions in our national footprint. We have offices in Walla Walla, Washington, San Diego, and Fresno, California, Jonesboro, Arkansas, Arlington, Tennessee, Marlette, Michigan, Omaha, Nebraska, DeWitt, Indianola, and Clive, Iowa, and Mineral Point, Wisconsin. We have a team of industry experts across the country who find creative real estate solutions for their clients. For the past several years, People's Company has been named a top brokerage in America and a top 5 auction house by the Land Report, an industry-leading publication targeted toward the American landowner. Our core business is broken down into 4 divisions consisting of land brokerage, land and asset management, land appraisal, and land investment. The Clark Organic Farm consists of 514.37 acres, more or less, of certified organic farmland, of which FSA certifies 488.94 acres, more or less, of tillable, and over 240 acres, more or less, irrigated. The farm is equipped with 5 valley pivots serviced by 3 high-capacity wells. This farm has a long history of producing high-value crops such as seed corn, potatoes, green beans, alfalfa, and hemp. The Clark Organics Farm is certified organic by the Midwest Organic Services Association, the 2nd largest organic certifier in the United States. This farm has been well managed by utilizing sustainable rotations to optimize organic production and maintain soil health. The area has numerous organic fertility sources from local poultry and hog producers, which provide an imperative, stable supply of high-quality fertilizer needed for an organic production system. The farm includes an operating sand quarry with deep frac sands providing monthly royalty payments to the landowner. The sand quarry is permitted for 71 acres and has a current lease in place with a local operator. This farm is currently pursuing an approval for a wetland mitigation bank, providing significant long-term upside for the new owner to develop the bank and sell wetland mitigation credits. The draft mitigation banking instrument has been submitted and reviewed by the interagency review team. An approval of the bank is anticipated in 2022, yielding up to 150 wetland credits. Before we get started today, if anyone has any questions during the webinar, please type in your questions in the comment section below and we'll try to get them answered at the end of our webinar. I'm excited to introduce our first speaker, Greg Jewell of Jewell Associates Engineers. Greg holds a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from University of Wisconsin-Platteville and an associate degree in land surveying technology from Madison Area Technical College. Greg is a certified professional engineer in Wisconsin and Minnesota and as a registered land surveyor in Wisconsin. Today, Greg is going to give us an overview about the sand located on Tract 1. Greg, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, all the parcels, Tract 1, 2, and 3 have been looked at for sand and quarry work, and we worked with Sauk County and the DNR to get things done. The current mining operation on Tract 1 has been in operation since 2018. It's permitted for about 71 acres. There's 109,000 cubic yards that have been removed from the site and little over 1.5 million cubic yards remaining. Next slide, please. There is a reclamation plan that we have done for the site, and this holds true for the entirety of the time the mine is in place. And basically it shows the slopes, and there's more detail to this too that would be in the permit, but it basically shows how the slopes would remain and how the parcel would be left. The intention was after the sand mining operation takes place, then that remaining land could be back into production field for crops. Next slide. This is just a diagram that shows the sand volume. And the farther north you get up towards the northern property line, you can see that's where the deeper sand is. But these were all computed using, we actually surveyed the entire site and then got our volumes from the conventional methods we used. Next slide. On tract 3, there was a little knoll in the field that should produce a little over 120,000 cubic yards of sand. And a special exemption permit to allow mining in this area would need to be obtained prior to commencement of the mining operation. And that will take the required approval of both Sauk County and the town of Spring Green. Next slide. That just shows the sand mining reclamation plan that we had shared with Sauk County in the beginning of the process. And all these sites were actually turned in at the same time for the special exemption permit, but only the active mine is currently being used. Nothing's been done on this site to date. Next slide. And that was about it for me. A couple things. 2003, the special exemption permit for that open mine area needs to be renewed. It's really not going to take any more than just permission from the town and the county to renew that. And then that has to be renewed every 5 years. But other than that, everything is set up on that site to go. That's all I had.
All right, guys, the lease for the quarry as well can be found in our data room. It can, and that is providing an annual revenue of just under $47,000 a year right now. Our second speaker today is Jeff Kramer of Heartland Ecological Group. Jeff is a founder of Heartland with over 18 years experience as an environmental consultant, ecological and regulatory policy practitioner. Jeff is recognized by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Wetland Delineation Assurance Program and is the longest standing assured wetland delineator in the state of Wisconsin. Today, Jeff is going to speak about the wetland opportunity located on track 2.
Great, thanks, Adam. Yeah, so we have been working on gaining approval for a compensatory wetland mitigation bank. Started in about 2016, working through some of the assessment and agency coordination process. The mitigation site is about 198 acres in size, and it is located within the Lower Wisconsin River Mitigation Bank service area. And so that would be tied to where credits could be sold and allocated directly. This particular parcel of land really lends itself to wetland mitigation, primarily because it's sort of borderlines on sort of developing into wetland already. And would require probably some sort of additional drainage really outside of restoring this to wetland. There's a lot of water directed from the Big Hollow watershed that gets the surface water is directed to this property. You can see on the slide in the northwest corner, there's a existing detention basin that captures a lot of that runoff and treats the runoff before coming onto the property. Groundwater fluctuates pretty significantly in this area, where it can be anywhere from 6 feet below the ground to actually above the surface. So we have some groundwater influence as well. There's existing drainage features. There's a ditch that runs west to east across the site, which discharges into the southeast corner, which is a regional drainage system constructed to drain water basically from this area. That particular drainage ditch in the southeast corner is protected under an easement and would be required to maintain some drainage there. Really minimal site work is required to restore hydrology on this property. It's very shallow grading is proposed, removal of the west to east ditch, and then some redirecting and spreading of surface water is required. Next slide, please, and I can discuss the restoration concept plan a bit here. So the figure on the left-hand side shows the in the light blue shading is what's proposed to be restored to wetland. The remaining areas would be upland buffer, and you can see the kind of those hatched dark areas are proposed grading, shallow grading of about only 2 inches of materials proposed to be removed. And the blue lines show the blue arrows show how the surface water would be directed and spread across the site with this grading plan. That red area is where the excavated material would be placed. So no material needs to really be hauled or removed from the site. There's adequate room to place it on site. The area in green in the southeast corner is it's a drier part of the wetland restoration site. There's some scrapes being proposed that are 2 to 4 inches, so a little bit deeper. We're still expecting that area to develop into wetland, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit here. And then the figure to the right is modeling that was completed. This modeling was based on pretty extensive on-site groundwater assessment through various wells that were installed. Observations of inundation following certain rain events. So we have a pretty, I'd say pretty accurate modeling that really shows how this site will get wet following the grading restoration. So this particular model shows the 1-year inundation depth. So the 1-year rain event would result in saturated soils across the site. And so this shows that what we are proposing to target for wetland hydrology certainly is achievable with this plan. The modeling also demonstrated that there'll be no offsite impacts to adjacent landowners from flooding or any other water related issues. There is no plan to back water up on the site. The plan is to utilize the surface water that's already directed to the site and spread it across the property to develop those wetland conditions. Next slide, please. This figure shows the concept plan related to the wetland type and the credit types proposed. And again, kind of the bluish area would be wetland reestablishment, and all of the wetlands on site are proposed to be established into wet meadow type communities. So the reestablishment area would have a 1-to-1 credit, and that's about 100-acre area. So that would result in 100 credits. Rehabilitation is just about 3 acres, and those would be some of the existing wetland areas that are in purple on here that would be enhanced. And so that would result in an additional 2.43 credits. One thing unique about this project is we have what we're calling a wetland buffer, and that's the green that I was speaking of earlier in the southeast part of the site. Because that's a drier part of the site that's going to require a little more excavation. We had some negotiations basically with the Corps of Engineers and the IRT to credit this area as if it's going to be upland buffer, which would be a 0.25 to 1 credit. However, if it does in the end develop into wetland and it meets the performance standards, it would be credited at a 1-to-1 ratio. So we have that's a 22.36 acre area. And so we have a range of potential credits for that area of 5.59 to 22.36 credits. And then the upland buffer is the remaining areas in orange around the site, and those will be tall grass, prairie, some sort of a native prairie mix, and maintained as upland areas. And that's 72.35 acres, and the uplands are credited at a 0.25 to 1 ratio. So that results in 18 credits. So you can see it, I have this range of credit potential on here from 126.54 credits to 148.9 credits, depending on that wetland buffer area. Next slide, please. And then the status of this project at this point, the prospectus was completed in 2016. And we worked through developing the draft mitigation banking instrument and compensation site plan that was submitted in 2020. And we've been working through addressing various comments from the Corps and IRT over the last 1.5 years. We spent last year in 2021 collecting more baseline information on soils and hydrology to kind of tweak the initial draft design. The high capacity well for the irrigation system lies right on the edge, and actually now within the mitigation site. That's being required to be relocated. I know Dale Clark has a plan for where that high cap well would go. We've coordinated with both DNR and the Corps on that location, and they're in agreement that would be appropriate, an appropriate place to avoid impacts to the wetland mitigation site. Grading plan revisions, those have been completed, at least in concept form, based on the additional information and the revisions that we were asked to make. We're still working on developing hydrology performance standards that will be slightly different than what's in the draft MBI, but we do have good direction and agreement on what those standards will consist of. And the credit type and credit release schedule also has been modified from the draft NBI, and we have that worked out with the Corps and IRT as well, and what that's going to look like. So really the next steps that we're at in this process is to basically put together a written memorandum of understanding to address those 5 items that are bullet pointed there in that list. Those are the primary items that were outstanding from the draft. And once we have written confirmation that these issues have been addressed and resolved, then the next step is really to finalize that MBI and the CSP for submittal and approval. We don't anticipate any additional baseline or data collection to complete that work. We do not anticipate any other hydrology modeling, some potentially minor engineering work to tweak or finalize the details of the grading plan may be necessary, but outside of that, I think the final efforts really are just updating the narrative of the MBI and the CSP. With that, I think that's about all I have.
We do got a couple of questions here, and if anybody else has any questions, please feel free to type them in the comment box here and we'll get them answered for you. This one for you, Jeff, here. What is the average acres sold of wetland acres per transaction and per year from your clients? If you can answer that a little bit more broadly.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a great direct answer for that because there's such a significant range in the amount of credits that are sold for a transaction. They're sold in hundredths of a credit. So as small as a hundredth through, it's very difficult in Wisconsin to obtain permits to fill wetlands of large sizes, except for, bigger industries like railroads and landfills, things of that nature, utility projects. So there's typically credit sales tend to be in less than one credit increments, unless there's some larger industrial project that may have many credits required. And I'm sorry, what was the second part to that question?
Just per year for your client. So I think we covered that well. We did.
Yeah, again, per year, it's going to vary substantially based on the location of the bank. There's some other banks in the northern part of this watershed that could be looked at to see what sort of credit sales that they've had over the years. But this will service a different part of that same service area.
Hey Jeff, this is Steve here. Can you just talk through new buyer comes in? Dale has done an immense amount of work with you through the years to get this to where you've got it today. But post auction, new buyer wants to move forward with this process. I mean, all your work is being assigned over to a new buyer. And can you just talk through next steps as far as getting this across the finish line and what your anticipated timeline would be?
Yeah, we are. So as I mentioned, there's the kind of 5 big items that we've been working on addressing over the last year. And those items, in my opinion, have been addressed based on the conversations that we've had with the review teams. And so really next step are just to solidify and get agreement that those have been addressed appropriately. And then it's finalizing the MBI document for final review. So I would not see any reason why this project could not be approved yet at some point this year if somebody that purchased this property kept moving forward with the process right away. Potentially even could be under construction in the fall or at some point next year.
And Jeff, another follow-up question, just, I think, this is a great opportunity for somebody to step in and if your credit yield comes in that 126 to 148 acre credits, what kind of credit pricing are you seeing in the marketplace right now?
Yeah, the credit prices range from 75,000 per credit, and we've seen them at $150,000 per credit. I would guess that this would probably be on the lower end of that range, in that 75,000 range.
But once the bank gets approved, and then you get on this credit release schedule, you've got to construct the wetland. I know you've done some back of the envelope math that, with price of diesel and everything else, those numbers change daily. But to construct the wetland, do you have some broad strokes, to help folks get an idea of what it would cost to move this forward and then take advantage of those credit prices?
Yep, you bet. So as far as the credit release schedule goes, we're still kind of working on finalizing what that will be. But in general, once the mitigation banking instrument is approved, there is a 10% credit release. So that's if we're basing it on 126 credits, that's 12 and a half credits are released and available for sale. And that's prior to doing any construction work on the site itself. So there's potential revenue without actually spending money on construction, close to $1 million in potential revenue. The next release schedule is based on an as-built. So that would be after you completed the grading and the seeding and also relocating that high cap well. So there'd be another 10% release once the site is constructed appropriately. So that's now we're looking at potentially, around 2 million in credit revenue after construction. And then following that, there'll be 5 years of management and monitoring required, and that's necessary to assess hydrology performance standards and vegetation performance standards. So there'll be credit releases they're called interim credit releases based on achieving hydrology and vegetation standards during each monitoring year, with a larger amount of credits released after that 5 years of meeting all standards. And so they're released intermittently throughout that 5 years. Cost of construction, really cost of getting from today through construction, management, and monitoring of 5 years is estimated at about 1.1 million. So that would include getting the plan finalized and approved, the grading work, the native seed installation, hydrology monitoring and vegetation monitoring for 5 years, plus invasive species management that would have to occur annually as well.
So to hit the point home on the cost estimate, after you buy the land, somewhere north of $1 million to see the process through, depending on, inflation factors and bids and whatnot. But then on your credit potential, if you're using, say, 75,000 a credit acre on that 126 to 148 acres, you're looking at $9 to $11 million of revenue then.
Correct. Yep.
It's pretty exciting. So the risk for a buyer here is just seeing the process through. But in our conversations, I feel like you've developed a great deal of confidence that there can be a wetland mitigation bank there. It's really a function of what the credit potential ultimately ends up being as you finalize the draft prospectus with the Corps. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, that's accurate. We have worked extensively and exhaustively with the Army Corps of Engineers and the DNR and the EPA, the USDA on this site. It's taken a while to get to this point, but we're at the final resolution of this project.
And one point I'd like to make is that, some of the folks on the call are probably asking the same thing I asked when I first sat down with Dale Clark on this property, which is, why would you sell this before getting the bank approved? And I think Dale has reached a point in his life where it's time to sell the farm, and it was a family decision to sell the farm, and the timing of getting the bank approval done and his desire to retire didn't align quite like you'd like it to, and so he had a farm machinery sale and sold his farm equipment, and so it's really a pretty unique opportunity for a buyer to step in with Jeff behind the 6 years of work that Dale and his family put into developing this site, and really see it through and take it to the next level and take advantage of that. Adam, I'll let you run through. There's quite a few questions that have popped up on the Q&A session here, and a lot of them are going to be for Jeff. One I might tackle here was the well, and Jeff, you can help me on this as well. So Dale has applied for a new high capacity well that would sit on track 4, parcel 4, and serve that piece. And the well that is on track 3 would be required to be relocated if you proceed with the development of the wetland. But if somebody bought track, and I said track 3, but track 2, if somebody bought track 2 and did not proceed with the wetland development, then they could continue to farm that piece and continue to irrigate it. You'd only be required to shut the well down on track 2 if you develop the wetland. Is that your understanding, Jeff?
Yep, that's absolutely correct. And that wouldn't, if it's associated with developing the wetland bank, it wouldn't have to occur until you want your as-built credit releases.
And so the way the farm functions today, the current well and the current pivot serves track 2 and track 4 together. And so the buyer of track 2 will continue to have the well and the pivot so long as they choose to not shut the well down to develop the mitigation bank. Track 4 owner can move forward with installing the well for the permit that Dale Clark has started the approval process for, which is a pretty straightforward process to get done. But then they will need to install a pivot on track 4 in order for track 4 to be irrigated. And so it's a little clunky in the respect of right now the well and pivot on track 2 serves track 4. If we have 2 separate buyers at the sale, then track 4 will need to move forward with if they want to continue to irrigate installation of a new well and a new pivot.
All right, a couple other
Adam.
questions here for you, Jeff. Does track 2 need to stay in an organic matter to be eligible for the wetland mitigation bank?
No, they're not associated with each other. Nope.
Do purchasers of the credits need to be close to the property, or can they be selected anywhere in the state to purchase them?
So there's kind of a ranking order of where credits need to be purchased based on the location of the permitted wetland impact. So first and foremost, this will serve the lower Wisconsin River Basin. So it's based on that specific watershed. So that would be the priority location. So it'd be kind of the projects that are closest to this site would go here. Secondly, if there are not credits available where that permit is issued, if it's in a different watershed, for example, then they're going to be looking at going to a bank that is nearby, that has the same type of wetland credits available for the impact. And so this really theoretically, it can service the Mississippi River watershed, which is 3/4 of the state. That it can't really jump over major watersheds, so it wouldn't be able to service like Lake Michigan or Lake Superior watersheds.
And are there any other wetland mitigation banks in southern Wisconsin currently?
Yes, there is one. Well, there's a couple of banks within this unit up near Toma. I think the one or two of them are, I believe, quite small and I think kind of on the tail end of their credits. And then there's a larger site in Toma that's been around a few years, but I don't know for sure how many credits they have left, but I think they have. I'd speak out of place, but I believe they had over 100 credits, potential credits. I don't know off the top of my head right now how many are available yet.
And then how exactly are the credits exchanged?
It's an affidavit is what they call this. So in coordination with the regulatory agency requiring the credit, so either the DNR or the Corps or both are going to require mitigation. So the credits are really just exchanged by documenting those credits that are purchased by wetland type. Payment is made by the applicant to the mitigation bank, and then that affidavit is signed, verifying that that transaction occurred. And then there's some accounting behind the scenes that would need to be, that are the responsibility of the bank owner to make sure that they're tracking credit sales and credit releases appropriately.
With this being within 5 miles of the Tri-County Airport, will this affect the site's ability to be approved?
Yep, this is within 3 miles of the Tri-County Airport. And it was something that we've had to deal with. We've had sign off from the FAA's biologist which is done by the USDA Wildlife Service. We actually did a 2-year-long bird study on the site. We developed some mitigative measures to eliminate risk to the airport. And we also had sign off from the Bureau of Aeronautics. That's the DOT state level wildlife biologist as well.
Is there any federal or state grant money available to help with the cost of the wetland restoration?
Typically, state and federal funding, grant funding does not apply to mitigation sites. So I would say that's highly unlikely.
If there is no need for credits due to lack of construction in the area, there may be no demand for the credits to be purchased.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of understanding the market going into this is that it's very variable. So it's, like I said, you could have a large railroad project that results in 10 to 20 acres of wetland impacts. Utility projects sometimes result in similar impacts. But that understanding that market would be important as a mitigation bank owner.
And I can answer this question here. Does track 3 have highway access to County G? Yes, it does. It'll be serviced by a 66-foot easement off of Highway G. And if anybody else has any other questions, I think I've covered them all thus far. All right, I want to thank everyone for joining the webinar today, and hopefully everyone gained some insight on the topics we discussed today. We'll be holding our second webinar March 17th at 10 a.m. If you have any further questions, please contact me at adam.crist@peoplescompany.com, and I'd be happy to get you any answers to your questions. Thanks everybody for joining today.
Thank you.